Mr. Ratboy, it's Dennis from the Australian Rock Show. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. Wonderful to chat with you today. May I begin by saying how great it is to get you on the podcast. And although some of our astute listeners will no doubt be aware of your rock and roll journey, most notably with bands like Motorcycle Boy, Pillbox, Marky Ramone and The Intruders, and also Sour Jazz, there are some who aren't. So for those, we are going to dig into your history a little bit and, of course, talk about the new album from the Golden Rat, the Tokyo duo comprised of yourself and Hiroshi, the Golden Arm. That's the main purpose of our chat today. An obvious first question is, when did the Golden Rat form and how did this new album titled We Got It Right come to fruition?
Yeah, so it probably started around 2016, I imagine. I had helped Hiroshi record an album with a band called Ace Killers Union, which is an electronic thing that he had done with some friends, and he wanted me to play lead guitar on it. So I'd known Hiroshi for years. First time I came to Tokyo, actually, I met him in 93, I guess, so nearly 30 years. And but we saw each other once in a while, but we didn't really work together that much. I played with him sometime on stage, but not much. But he asked me to do this thing, so then we reconnected on a deeper level at that time. And I always wanted to play little shows of covers just for the hell of it, and I thought he would be a great guy to do that with. So I asked him, and he said, okay. So we started playing just like this tiny bar or like these clubs, and it was quite fun. And we never planned to go much further than that. But when COVID hit, we had already like about 20 songs or something that we could play. We switched around, and people kind of liked that. They didn't really know what they were going to get that time. And when COVID hit, I just decided to, instead of losing it all, to record it. And it was more like to just keep it somewhere, you know. It was not the idea of making a record, but it turned out pretty good, and it ended up being a record.
So the basic idea, and I am quoting from the press release, if I may, was to pick material that had a big impact on both of you when it came out during your teenage years in the late 70s, early 80s. Some of these songs were hugely popular, some not at all, but all of them made a long-lasting impression on you both. It's pretty cool that although Hiroshi was in Japan and you were in Switzerland, you're both immersing yourselves in the same kind of music when you were teenagers. And then some years later, it's this love of the same kind of rock and roll which connects you both. That's the power of music, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting, but I guess we were in the same kind of stuff. We were about the same age, and it all started, I think, for both of us with like the Dahls and the Stooges and stuff like that. And of course, this hit us pretty hard, but then you dig up a little deeper, and you want stuff that is current also. So around the same time, we were digging the same stuff and looking for the same stuff. So it was really interesting that we actually, I noticed that the first time I met him, the first time I met him in 93. We talked about music, and we were totally on the same wavelength. So I knew that he was on the same wavelength. What was interesting with this thing is that we both much older now, but we still like this stuff, but we didn't see the point of really playing it the way, a lot of cover albums are like people trying to do it better or to do it the way it was. But it was more like, we like these songs. How can two guys with guitars, with just acoustic guitars, do it? Or, just show this. The songs are good. We picked songs that we thought were really good, even with just the one guitar or something, just one dude singing it. And that was kind of the idea, not to reproduce, the Saints or...
Yeah, I know what you're saying. And just going on from that, we, in fact, kicked this show off with the Golden Rat's take of Russian Roulette, originally recorded back in 1982 by the Lords of the New Church. Your interpretation here is superb, and you really have made it your own. Not an easy thing to do on a song like that. And I think, again, your blurb in the press release said it best, and I quote, Steve Bators and Brian James had come up with a band that could launch the heritage of the previous generation into the future, and this song did just that. This is obviously a special song for both you and Hiroshi.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I lived in London in 1983, so I saw the Lords when the first single came out, just New Church, and it was like a revelation, because I heard, I listened to the Dahls, I listened to the Heartbreakers and stuff like that, but I didn't see these bands until, when in London I saw Johnny and stuff. I started seeing Iggy and Johnny and stuff like that, but before I hadn't. And the Lords of the New Church were like my version of the Dolls or the Stooges. It was for my generation, it was that time. And I guess for the people here, it worked the same way, I guess, in Tokyo.
And the Golden Rat recently filmed a fantastic promo video for Russian Roulette, which has generated some strong interest since it was uploaded.
Yeah, it seems to be quite popular, which is good.
Talk of Brian James there is a nice segue into the song, which in fact kicks off We Got It Right. It's your cover of a pretty obscure single released by Brian back in 1979 called Ain't That a Shame. How did you discover this tune and what kind of impact did it have on you?
Well, this again from the Lords. I mean, when I saw the Lords, I was like, I thought Brian James was God, and I was just like, what has this guy done? Of course, I knew of the Damned, but he had done a few little things in between the Damned and the Lords, including these singles. There was a bunch of singles, and a band called Tense Their Youth, and so I dug up all these things, and I always thought that Ain't That a Shame was a hit. I mean, I cannot. It was really obscure. It was just a single. I had also a 12-inch single. It was a longer version. And Stuart Copeland was on drums, so it was an interesting thing. I mean, it was.
And it's a really striking way. I think it sets the whole tone of the album by starting this album with it.
He's kind of like the key. I mean, we both like him a lot. I guess he's somebody who stayed really. Truthful to what he likes. He still put out good music. He's somebody I really respect. So.
Well, slightly off topic, but I do believe your mid-'80s Swiss outfit, Broomsticks Riders, opened for the Lords of the New Church, did they not?
Yes, we did actually. Yeah, I did open for them in 80. Must have been 85 or something in Zurich, Switzerland. Yeah, I actually talked to Brian James then. It was funny because I remember. I don't know if you know technical stuff, but it's funny because I was playing a Mesa Boogie at the time, my guitar amp, and Brian always played a mix of like a Vox AC30 and a Marshall or something like this. And the roadies came to me and he goes, "You should get something like that." And they actually brought him on stage, say, "Why don't you get something like that?" Because my amp was tiny but really loud, and it distorted much more than his sound is pretty clean actually. Always was clean. And my sound was much more distorted. And the roadies were like, maybe they would have rather carried just one single amp than that they had. Very fun.
That's a good story. Good story. Now, before we dig into some of your history, I do note that there are two Australian bands on this album which you've covered, Radio Birdman with Love Kills and The Saints with A Minor Aversion. Both of these interpretations are very strong and obviously got my attention. Not easy songs to tackle, I imagine. How did these two bands fly onto your radar?
Very, I guess, really early. The Saints probably before Radio Birdman for me. I'm Stranded was really big in France. Like I was reading, I speak French, so I was reading the French magazine at the time, and they got really great reviews comparing them to the Stooges and Lou Reed and all this stuff. So I listened to it really early when it came out, and I was floored. Birdman came a little bit later. The album was released in Australia. It was released earlier, right?
Correct.
And so we had the British version. It came out probably 78.
Okay.
And then I heard probably TVI or something. It was probably through that cover that I heard first.
Okay, and Sour Jazz, of course, did a great take of Messing with the Kid on the Lost for Life album, which listeners need to go hunt down, and we will talk about all that down the track. Now, I do recall you telling me some years back that the first Hitman album from 1981 also had a huge impact on you as well, didn't it?
The sound of that record to me was godlike. When I heard this one, I got actually the Australian version. I don't think that came out in any other country that I know of. I think it was an Australian import that I heard in Europe. And the sound of that was kind of like Iggy on. I'm a huge fan of New Values, of Iggy's New Values album, and the way Scott Thurston played guitar on this album. And I saw the guitars on the Hitman were very close, but harder edged. The songs were somewhat similar to Iggy stuff, but like poppier, and it was just really a great mix of everything I like. Yeah, that album is one of my
Yeah, it still stands. Wonderful record, which still, has stood very well as the years have gone on. But what I really like about the new album, We Got It Right, is that it's so different from most other things out there today, diverse. And for me, that's really refreshing. Hiroshi's guitar playing on these tracks is a perfect example of that. And I think he's really challenged himself and has excelled. And also, the addition of, say, saxophone to some of this material works, really superbly and really broadens the sound of these songs. The Whole of the Law and the aforementioned A Minor Version are perfect examples.
Thank you. Yeah, for Hiroshi, I really like the way he played. He really rised up to the occasion here. Like I knew for what he does regularly, the Golden Arm and the Remains, and he does that very well. But I also knew that he's a big fan of rock music, just like me, and he knows. I mean, we grew up on the same stuff, and I was interested to see what he would come up with in this kind of setting, more like an acoustic, a quieter thing. And he totally delivered on every track. He came up with great stuff on every track. It's going to be surprising for people who know his regular.
Yeah, which is a cool thing, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. I also wanted to put him out of his comfort zone. Like I put myself out of. I'm not a singer. So I decided to be the singer and to play acoustic guitar. I'm an electric guitar player, but I didn't play a single note of electric guitar. So all the electric guitars are Hiroshi, but Hiroshi is more like a singer, also a guitar player, but he didn't sing anything really.
Yeah.
So we both had to deliver in different areas.
Mate, let's delve into your past, if we may. Born and raised in Switzerland, were you listening to music on the radio as a kid? Where did the love of music first start for you?
Radio in the 60s, probably the Beatles, and I remember Louis Armstrong, Hello Dolly. That's probably the first thing I remember hearing on the radio and being in awe of this voice and this. It's so happy in a way. It was just such energy in it. It was, and I mean, the Beatles were, when I was a kid, they were still playing. So I remember Hey Jude being on the radio. My sister, I have a sister who's 5 years older than me, and she listened to the Beatles. So I heard kind of some of the singles at the time when they were coming out, the late Beatles, of course. And then hard rock, like Deep Purple, was probably a huge thing.
Well, your first album was Machine Head, correct?
Machine Head, yeah.
Okay. Of course, recorded in Switzerland at the Grand Hotel in Montreal.
Yeah. Also, that was interesting. To know the story and everything.
Yeah. On the cover of the Golden Rat album, it states "File Under Soundtrack of Our Teenage Years." This makes me ask, how were you exploring so many of these artists growing up in Switzerland? Were you mentioned the French magazine before, but were you hitting the used record stores, exploring back catalogs, that kind of thing? Yeah,
I was always in record stores. People were ordering stuff, and we were reading. I was also reading the British press. So digging up stuff from the press and then looking for it, which was really fun compared to what's going on now. I don't think people are bombarded with so much crap now. They don't need to go look for really anything they want. They just take whatever they like from what he's put in front of their nose. But it was not like that before.
Yeah.
So I would read. I mean, you'd make connection. You read something, and somebody would say, "Oh, this album sounds like this." It's probably the way I discovered Radio Birdman. And then you go, I need to hear this, And sometimes it took 2-3 months to actually track down these records. Or a single, just to hear one song. You didn't have, or you heard something on the radio. There was a show on Swiss radio that was an hour a week, and they played really obscure stuff. And maybe you heard a single, and you were not sure what the name of the band was, but you go and dig it up.
And often, I don't want to get too off track, but often there was a risk as well if you bought a record without ever hearing it. Often, or a single, you'd get it home and it would suck. Well, you're stuck with it, but
it would suck. But sometimes it would also force you to since you bought it, you try to find the good in it, and you just listen to it, and you discovered something. Or maybe it opened your mind a little bit.
Yeah,
it happened to me a few times.
What I love about the new album is I mentioned the diversity, and I know it is going to be one of those releases which will have listeners search out the original. And I can understand how someone like the Stranglers or Patti Smith might have ended up on your Teenage Turntable, both of which, are covered here. But what about someone like the fairly obscure UK outfit Little Roosters and their 1981 recording Ain't Proud?
Well, that's again a French thing, I guess,
Okay.
because that was recorded for a French label. The story goes that it's produced by Joe Strummer, and the story goes is that he produced them to pay for dental work, which is probably true. I don't know.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
But yeah, it's you can find that on the net somewhere, and it makes sense in a way because his teeth were pretty bad. But this came out on a French label. Because he was on a French label, they made it on French TV, so I saw them on French TV once.
Yep.
It was amazing to see a band like that on French TV, like the Faces or something, like a punk rock version of the Faces or something. So of course I went and dug up the album, which was hard to find, and the hit was a song called "People Break Down," which is more like an upbeat thing, but the B-side of that single was actually "I Ain't Proud." And to me, that was the bluesiness of it, and I really loved it. And later, when I I lived in London in '83, between '83 and '84. Gary G. Lemon had a band called Gary and the Roosters, and I saw them a few times, and it was the same kind of thing, and I was just really, really into it.
Some great sounding saxophone on your version of Ain't Proud, by the way, which works really well. I really like that.
Yeah, the version is very different, actually. See, if people don't know it and they like it the way we did it, they'll be surprised by what the original is, which it's very good. It's actually on YouTube, so you can dig it up.
Okay, and I believe your path as a musician began in the late 1970s when your uncle bought you your first guitar. Is that the story?
Yes. My parents, my sister had a guitar.
Okay.
And she as soon as it got a little bit challenging, she put it down, and but it was still her guitar, and I picked it up, and I wanted my own, and my parents were like, it's going to be a fad, you're not going to play it. But my uncle actually bought me one, and changed my life that way.
I can recall you telling me one time you saw Led Zeppelin. Was that June 1980 in Zurich?
Yes, that's it. Yeah,
okay.
I think they played one more show after that, and that was it. It was probably one of the last shows they ever played. Yeah.
Just before John Bonham passed away. So you moved to London, I believe, in the early 1980s and got to see many great bands, Heartbreakers, Lords of the New Church, who we mentioned, Hanoi Rocks, Dogs d'Amour, and Nicky Sudden, to name a few. This time period must hold many, many fond memories for you.
It was amazing, yeah, because it was just a post-punk and everything. It began a renaissance of rock and roll, like I like. It just happened to be then at that time. And all these people were playing small clubs. I saw Hanoi Rocks at the Marquee, like 3 nights for all those Wasted Years videos. And a week after, it would be 2 days of Lords of the New Church also at the Marquee, and tiny clubs with like the Barracudas and Marionette, all these bands on this compilation called Trash on Delivery. I don't know if you know that song. Babysit.
Yeah, very, very fertile time period, isn't it?
Yeah, Nicky Sudden was playing with Cuss Words. They had the Jacobites, and they were just playing kind of like what we started doing with Hiroshi, just two guys with guitars, and it was amazing. And we talked to everybody, and the scene was really healthy and fun.
Love it. So early to mid 1980s, you relocate back to Switzerland. Now, many fans of yours will know that you were in the outfit Broomsticks Riders, but prior to that, Brian Blade, you were guitarist for the Mystery Girls, featuring the female vocals of Helen and Jenny, who cut a rare 4-track acetate in 1983. I believe only 5 copies are known to exist from this outfit, who included a future member of the Dogs d'Amour, Mark Drax. Have I got that right?
Yes, you got that right, yeah. He moved with me to London, and when I came back, actually my parents, my dad got sick, and then so I went back to take care of my parents, my dad. But he stayed in England after, and he ended up playing. We were in the same scene. I mean, we were doing the same stuff, but I went back, and he stayed, and he ended up playing in the Dogs d'Amour, and a band called On the Wire, I think, which was, I forgot who was in it. Maybe the singer from the Dogs d'Amour before Tyler. It was a guy called Rob Stoddard. I think he had a band called On the Wire after that with this guy, and then in the end he moved to Canada, I think, and he's building furniture or something. He's doing something.
The Mystery Girls is interesting. I've listened to it. It's an interesting artifact. You know, if I See Tears is catchy, I liked Stupid Guy, which has a nice guitar solo in there from you as well. I guess a sign of things to come, isn't it? You know, a bit of Shangri-La's flavour in there too, which is cool.
it was all like, it was the Richmond kind of Shangri-La's meet Modern Lovers, but like the quiet, the second version of the Modern Lovers, more acoustic-y, more like it was fun.
And there's a there's a track called "And Nobody Want to Stay With Me Tonight" with a motorcycle revving at the intro.
Yeah.
I dug that. Kind of ironic too of things that lay ahead. Motorcycle boy.
Yeah. I always had motorcycles. Like,
yeah.
Age 18, so that was mine actually. It was a 125.
Really, I didn't know that. Okay.
I make it sound more evil.
Okay. Now, recorded in London in February 1986, Broomsticks Riders left behind one full-length album titled Rockin' Aliens. Of the 12 tracks contained on the wild side / mild side, you wrote or co-wrote every song on that 1986 album, did you not?
Yeah, I did probably most of it, and co-writing maybe a couple. I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
I would have to look.
How many copies of Rockin' Aliens were pressed, and how do you think that record holds up 35 years later?
I don't know. I never listened to it. I thought it was one mistake we made with that record is that we put too many tracks, and but we wanted to use all these tracks. I think there was 12 tracks, and some were pretty long. And in the end, it sounded really thin. Like it would have been better, if you put less music, the grooves are wider and get more bass. And I really think it sounds wimpy. And I don't know where the masters are. I would like to. Maybe one day I'll try to remaster it from the record and make it sound a bit more together.
Yeah,
more bassier.
I think you should. I think people would be interested in hearing that stuff.
Yeah, but we did something after, which was really interesting. We the first version I was singing and I was playing guitar, and then we skimmed it down to like just one guitar, one bass, one drummer, and we got an English singer, and we did some demos with that. And there's a 4-track demo that is quite good that I'm pretty proud of. There was the singer was called Remy Martin, and he was from a band called The Big Bang. They were really a super glam band in London. And he came to Switzerland, and he was going back and forth, and we recorded some demos, and we played some shows. So I have some VHS of shows. That's the band that opened for the Lords. It was with him.
Okay, so
that version was much better than the version with me singing.
Okay, you might have to help me with my timeline, because I believe in '88 you moved to Hollywood and joined Motorcycle Boy. But did Broomsticks Riders relocate there as a group? Because I did find a couple of flyers online for a gig at the Coconut Teaser. Or was that from an earlier time?
2 members moved to Hollywood. So me and the bass player, and we made a new lineup.
Okay,
we played the same song in Hollywood for like a couple of shows. Yeah.
Did you give a tape to Iggy around that time period as well, when you first got to Hollywood looking for a gig?
I left the tape with him. I didn't see him at that time. I left the tape in his hotel somewhere when he got Andy McCoy, like for that tour. I tried to play with Iggy for years, and I talked to him many times. I was a lot of people say you should play with this guy, but he never did. I mean, he always had other reasons to pick up his own.
So when you joined Motorcycle Boy, they'd been around a fair while already, I think, and had released a cassette demo, I think, produced by Keith Morris, which is pretty interesting. How did you join Motorcycle Boy?
It was I was trying to find a band. I asked people if you know anything, and somebody came up and goes, "Oh, that band Motorcycle Boy, they're looking for somebody." And I was like, I knew of them, but I'd never heard them. And so I went and met them. And it was weird. The first day we just drank like idiots, and we'd listen to disco music, and it was really funny, actually. And then for 1 week, they didn't call me back. And we didn't play any music. It was just hanging out. And then for 1 month, they kind of took me out to clubs and showed me around and asked people if I was cool enough, if I was cute enough. It was like a drinking contest for a month. And then I felt sure if I was in the band, and I called Francois and I said, "What's going on?" "Oh, yeah, you're in the band. We're going to practice next." Then we started practicing, but they didn't know if I really played guitar.
And I guess it's worth noting that it was in Motorcycle Boy that you were given the name Ratboy, correct?
Yes, it was one of Francois from Motorcycle Boy used to have a roommate, a guy who worked on movie posters in Hollywood, and he had just worked on this movie called Ratboy, which is a Sandra Locke movie, Clint Eastwood's ex-wife.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, your new guy looks just like Ratboy, this poster I'm working on. And it stuck right away.
Interesting. So the band issued a 7-inch in 1989, Feel It, backed with One Punch, issued by Flipside. My brother and I used to crank that one a lot. Really love your guitar solo on One Punch, by the way. I think it's one of the catchiest songs committed to a B-side, I might add.
Yeah, we looked at it as a double A-side, really.
Okay.
I also think it might be better than Feel It. I've played it more. I've played it with some other bands, but I Feel It, I never played it again.
So you spent about 3 years with Motorcycle Boy. The band had all the ingredients to go to the upper level, good tunes, a strong local fan base. And I mean, you were also in the right place at the right time. Surely there were some major labels sniffing around the band back then.
Yeah, I mean, everything looked good. I mean, by the time I joined, they were already doing really good. And we did even better. I brought in some songs and they were thinking a lot. So I was trying to clean them up a little bit. And I think it worked for a little. So the shows were getting tighter and people really dug it. But we were always a bit on the edge of what was going on in LA. We were much more like the Ramones or like the Dahls or something, but we're like everybody was like Poison or Guns N' Roses. And, we didn't have the long guitar solos. We didn't have this good time kind of attitude thing that everybody's like, the Poison kind of thing. So they were interested, but we were the kind of band that you would have to build something. We didn't fit in the mold of what was selling at the time. And there was plenty of bands to pick, and they were perfect. They would be another one of these type of bands. And we were kind of unmanageable also because of the drinking, partying. And I can understand that we would have not made it, even if we made it on a major label. We didn't know it then, but now I can see that we were. Which was cool. I mean, we were just doing it. We were not a product or anything. We were doing it just like the bands that we liked, like the Stooges or something.
Yeah.
Just live, I guess.
Any big name supports
that we supported?
Yeah.
Yeah, we put the Dogs D'Amour, Circus of Power. Like a lot of people came, and we had L7 support us. Bands like this. I mean, we had smaller bands that got huge afterwards, and we didn't understand what happened. It was I remember L7 opened for us a few times, and then one time they asked us to open for L7. We're like, no, it's not. Doesn't work that way. We're like, no, they're big now. They're on Epitaph or something. Or they were on. I don't remember which label. There was some Seattle thing. And suddenly we were like kind of oblivious to what was going on outside of Hollywood. Really, we didn't go out much. We were playing in Hollywood. It was fun. We were like the kings of Hollywood for a year or two.
Love it. And We Got It Right is dedicated to Sylvain, Walter Lua, Ivan Crowell, and also Chris Bailey. Sylvain, of course, produced Motorcycle Boys' Popsicle album, issued on Triple X. What was it like working with Syl?
It was really interesting. I mean, for me, it was a dream come true. I mean, coming from Switzerland, I had listened to the Dahl, so I love the Criminals and I love his solo albums. Actually, I basically was into hiring him more for the second solo album, was the Teardrops, than anything else. I love that album. So he was not our first choice. Our first choice was James Williamson, but we could not find him. At the time, he was working for Sony somewhere. We tried to track him down. We asked everybody. We couldn't find him. And then we thought about Johnny Saunders, but we thought he probably would not be able to actually produce a band. I don't know. He was not so together at the time. And I met Sylvain in a guitar store in New York City. And he was driving a cab actually at the time. He stopped by to buy strings or something. He came in and he left the cab outside and we started talking. We hit it up right away. And I was already signed and we had not decided on the producer. So I thought suddenly, I was like, wow, why not?
And you did just mention Johnny Thunders there, which is a nice segue. I do need to make mention of your take of the Heartbreakers. It's Not Enough on the new album. Many of us have a great appreciation for his softer acoustic stuff, particularly the Hurt Me album, and I know you do too. Why did you go with It's Not Enough?
Because for me, that was the first glimpse of what Thunders would do later, actually, because the Heartbreakers album was pretty tough and it was a rock album, nearly like a Ramones album, so sounded like a Motorhead album in a way. But that song stands out for me for being like different. Like he was always into ballads and the only ones. Later he did like Dylan ballads and stuff like that. It's the first time we hear that, and I was always into this kind of softer stuff.
Well,
so for me, that
ahead.
was a standout on the record from the beginning, more than Chinese rocks or something, which is, really a standard punk rock party song.
I do recall that some time back you recorded a version of Diary of a Lover on the 3-CD Thunders tribute album from 2009 called Born to Lose. And I guess this is significant as it's your first solo recording and one that's very special to you, isn't it?
Yes, because I never, since the Broomsticks Riders, I never sang after that. I was a guitar player. All the bands I was hired as a guitar player. And at the time when I think it was just after I quit Marky Ramone, or Marky Ramone will tell you that he fired me, I was asked to do this compilation. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. Like, who was going to sing? And he said, you can sing. And I was like, wow, okay. So I took Joe Rizzo, who was the bass player, the drum in Pillbox, and the bass player from Marky Ramone, and we went in the studio. And I loved The Only Ones, and I loved that song. And I was trying to make it, what if Diary of a Lover was played by, the same kind of band that played on So Alone or something, like some members of The Only Ones or something like that. So I arranged it that way. And I was really happy.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful version. Mate, why don't we take a break with a tune, and your take of Diary of a Lover seems like the ideal choice. Going back to 2009, lifted off the Johnny Thunders tribute album, Born to Lose, released on Sky Rebs Records. Here is Mr. Ratboy with Diary of a Lover. Okay, back to Motorcycle Boy, and as some listeners may be aware, when the album comes out a year after it's recorded, you departed the band, and although you'd played all of the guitars on Popsicle, your replacement appears on the album cover and you get credited as a quote, unquote, additional musician.
Yeah. So, that happened.
That happened.
I was not so happy about it, but it was okay. It's okay. So the Motorcycle album took a long time to come out. And after the recording, the band was going downhill pretty fast. I mean, maybe out of boredom or out of, I don't know, people started drinking even more than we were, and some drugs appeared, and there was no way we could have promoted this album properly. And it took too long. And then in the end, we played a few shows, and I just didn't feel it anymore. It was just like, okay, it's time to move on.
I believe that your final gig with Motorcycle Boy, to me, says a lot about who you are. It all ended, I believe, at Al's Bar after a fight between vocalist Francois and Kenny, the drummer. And at that moment, you'd had enough, unplugged your amp and walked out through the audience. I love that story. That's rock and roll, but it sounds like you were done with it all.
Yeah, it was really, really dramatic. It was fun. It's just, they were fighting on stage during the first song. I was just like, fuck that, I'm leaving. And I left through the audience. Actually, my amp was tiny. I had a tiny little Fender amp. I could carry it. So I took my guitar and I left to the audience. And they were still fighting. I remember hailing a cab outside, and they were still fighting. And at one point, Francois said, "Come back, Ratboy. We finished the show." It's like,
love it.
And it was also, it was great. It was reviewed in Flipside or somewhere.
Okay.
And they thought it was one of the greatest rock and roll shows they ever saw. It was fun. It was one song.
And many listeners may not be aware that after Alice Cooper saw a photo of Motorcycle Boy, he invited you to audition as his touring band for the Trash album. It's an audition you've described as hilariously catastrophic. Yes. We had seen an interview of Alice Cooper mentioning us. He liked our looks or something. He said, I like that. These guys look. But we didn't think anything. But one morning we got a call from Shep Gordon, his manager, and he said that Alice wanted to audition us. And we were like, whoa, okay, that's cool. When? And he said, now. And it was like 10 or something, and we just woke up. So we went to the place where they asked us to go, and only 3 of us made it. The guitar player, we could get a hold of the guitar player. So we showed up. I had forgotten my guitar because I was kind of hungover. And there was a bunch of people wanting to audition. I mean, it was an audition. He had asked a lot of bands, but he wanted us first. So I borrowed a guitar from somebody else I knew, and we went in. And
Alice was there, and was a video camera and some dude, and he said, "So, wow, great! So, yeah, I love you, great. You guys look." He goes, "So, which one of my songs do you know?" And we're like, "Well, 18, school's out." He goes, "Which one can you play?" I'm like, "Oh, none." "So you didn't prepare for this?" "No, you just called us like an hour." So, "Oh, that's cool. So
It's a
what
great
can
story.
you?" And we say we can play our songs, and but we were missing one guitar player, and so already it was a bad start. But we tried to play one. And Francois, the bass player, I don't know if you've seen videos. He jumped a lot on stage, and he had one of these spaghetti cords. So he plugged himself in his huge amp with his spaghetti cord, and he jumped on the first note and he unplugged himself. So it was me and a drummer playing this song that I wrote, "Suicide," on the Motorcycle Boy album. So it was just one guitar riff and one drum beat.
Catastrophic.
He was jumping around, but we couldn't. There was no bass, and
Wow.
it was really funny. So everybody was laughing. He laughed his ass off, and he said, "You guys are great. I'll give you a call." And we never heard from them again. But I saw him a couple of times later, and he always remembered. He always laughed and pointed to us. "You guys are great. You guys are great."
Great
And
story. I love that
a
story.
guy-
Yeah.
He hired the guitar player who got the deal was a guy who went to GIT or something. A guy who lived in my building, who was playing scales all day long while we were going out and getting drunk. He was playing scales.
Who was that? Was it Petrelli or Pete Friesen?
No, it was. I forgot his name.
It's not important. I'm getting off track.
Yeah. It's. If you look at the band for
Yeah.
the Trash tour,
Yeah.
it's one of.
Love it. Great story. And of course, Motorcycle Boy did the song Loudmouth on the 1991 Ramones tribute album Gabba Gabba Hey. Kind of ironic as you'd go on to play with Marky later on.
Yeah, it's funny, right?
Yeah. So
I
before...
was always a huge fan of the Ramones. I was very happy to do this. We were signed to XXX, and that was a XXX thing, so of course they asked us to do this.
And before we move on, and I am going to cut to a Motorcycle Boy tune, I couldn't decide on which tune to play, so I am going to play both the A side and the B side. Why the hell not? And as I said, One Punch is such a great tune and more people need to hear it. Did you ever hear the covers, which a Hungarian band called Junkies did, of both these tunes back in the mid to late 90s?
No, never. I heard the New Bomb Turks Feel It.
I think you should search them out. I think you'll dig them.
That's so fun.
Yeah, so before we crank this, how would you summarise your time in Motorcycle Boy? And with the beauty of hindsight, would you have done anything different?
No. It was fine. It was like a learning experience. I made a lot of connections that worked out later. It was totally fun. I mean, It was also, it was Hollywood, right? And as soon as I went to New York to play, I realized that I belonged there, not really in Hollywood. So it was kind of like my first steps or something. And more like it. I met different type of people, and it was more my turf than LA was.
Motorcycle Boy there from 1989. Now, Ratboy, before we move on to another major musical chapter in your life being Pillbox, I do wish to make mention of the glorious stomping Bebe Buell single Gargoyle backed with Bored Baby from 1992, which you produced. Is that you playing the solo on Gargoyle or Coyote Shivers?
I would have to listen.
Okay.
I think we split it. I mean, we were both playing solos. I think so. I don't know. I might do the first one and second. I don't remember. We were basically splitting the solos.
Okay. And whilst talking about production there, you've produced all the tracks on this new album from the Golden Rat. What things are you listening out for when performing that role?
Trying to sound authentic. I mean, it's hard. Of course, I like producing in real studios better than like how I have to do the Golden Rat, because that's a home recording. But I did the best I could, what I had. I always like real sounds. I like real guitars, real drums, and also I like the fuck ups. I like what makes the music click. The fact that it's not mechanical. So I always look for that, for like these mistakes. Like if you listen to the Stones or something. They're like a bar band, but it worked. I like that. This is just disjointed, just enough, to be cool.
Okay, let's talk about Pillbox for a bit. An outfit who are every inch, the real deal. Post Motorcycle Boy, you're living and working in New York City, and you meet vocalist Chris Barry, who was then performing with his outfit 39 Steps. You see him play at CBGB's and are very impressed. Thus, the nucleus of the band Pillbox is born. I read where you described Chris as the perfect Iggy, Steve, Jeffrey Lee combination.
Yes, he was very good. Like the minute I saw him, I knew that was the guy. The problem was 39 Steps. And the problem was that 39 Steps were much bigger. Of course, I didn't have a band at the time, so I had to convince him to come play with me. But he had a management. He was managed by a guy called Steve Shipp, who worked with Kenny Laguna. And they had money, and they were paying for everything. They were doing videos, and they were recording. And Canadian bands benefit from a lot of advantages for being Canadian. The government pays for some stuff. So they had a lot more than I had to offer. And it was really hard to convince Chris to actually let go of 39 Steps, which had gone a little bit sour by then. I thought they were not as good as what I heard earlier. And the way they actually were looking for a guitar player, and what happened is I kind of auditioned for 39 Steps to try to steal Chris, basically.
Oh, okay, yep.
Yeah, so I auditioned for them, and it was just not my thing. They were trying to do the cult kind of thing, but like a love cult, not the electric cult, like a slick kind of thing. And but they had more money. I mean, it was a different thing. So if you ask Chris, he probably will tell you a different story, but that's basically what it was. Joe Rizzo was the drummer. He was already with me, and we were trying to get him to commit, but we could not really get him to commit 100%.
But you had a great chemistry between you and Chris, didn't you?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We wrote great songs, and again, kind of like Hiroshi, somebody who grew up on the same stuff. And it's just, we look up to the same people, and it was just, I felt really lucky to find another great singer, because Francois was a great singer. Francois is the kind of guy who can just improvise lyrics. So a song like Get Some would change every day. It would be different lyrics. It would always rhyme and work, and it would be always funny and everything. I was just like, wow, that's a real singer. He didn't need to write down anything. It was just, he was a natural. And Chris was the same, even better. I mean, because he didn't play bass. Francois played bass and he drank, so he could fuck up the musical part quite a bit. But Chris, being just a singer, he could do his thing. And if we had a tight band, we had like this wild singer, and it was totally excellent.
Chris Barry has an amazing rock and roll history, and for listeners who may not know, in the 1970s, he was in Montreal's first punk outfit, the 222s. There's a recent and fascinating interview with Chris on the Mega Blast podcast, and if you're a fan of Pillbox, you do need to go and check that out. It's really informative. I will put a link to that in our show notes. So Pillbox left behind the wonderful Jimbo's Clown Room album from 1993 on Circumstantial. And I do got to give a shout out to Larry G if you're listening in.
Yes.
Yeah, an extremely strong record, which some have claimed was one of the best ever releases from that decade. No weak moments anywhere on that record, Mr. Ratboy.
Thank you. Yeah, I really, this is a record that when I played, I'm really proud of. And that's with this band that we actually toured with the Ramones in Canada. We did Canada. We played in front of a lot of people. We did quite well, actually. But again, this type of music is not, but at the time it was already grunge, so we were just already passé.
Yeah. And reissued on vinyl quite recently by Yeah Right as well, I believe.
Yes.
There is an accurate and lengthy assessment penned on All Music by Robert May about Pillbox, which I'd like to share, if I may. Singer Chris Barry of 222's 39 Steps fame and Ratboy Motorcycle Boy team up to produce one of the best rock albums from the 90s or any decade you've never heard before. A glam punk sleaze classic direct from New York's Lower East Side, from the days when Lower East Side was a junkie hellhole, a brilliant piece of work that was sadly overlooked in its time. Before there was a Strokes to make it safe as milk, the snarly glam punk spirit of the Stooges, New York Dolls and Dead Boys lived for a time in the skinny-assed, tattooed bodies of Pillbox, a New York quartet which offered a skankier, more menacing and less theatrical alternative to the like-minded and better-known D-Generation. In capturing the Lost Boys' sound and tawdry ambience of their idols without overdoing it, the energetic Jimbo's Clown Room drives down a power alley of sharp, memorable songs on twin hot rods, guided by guitarist Ratboy's slithery Johnny Thunders / Steve Jones raunch and X39 step singer Chris Barry's wavering, whiny conviction. The catchy plea to a drug dealer, come up heroin, is pitiful and obnoxious, but what she wants, Sister Caroline, and the amphetamized Nowhere Land wrap the line between inspiration and imitation around history's neck to fine effect. Brilliant, brilliant. I think that's brilliant.
That's nice. Yeah, he hit it right on.
And as many of your fans will know, you possess your own unique guitar sound, and that sound is etched onto so much of your recorded work. But with Pillbox, I call it that Ratboy guitar sound. It's noticeable on tracks like Holly and Sinister Urge. Those tracks are as good as examples as any, and we will play something in a moment. But tough question, but how do you look back on that time period with Pillbox?
Again, that was really great. I mean, this was my dream band. This is what I wanted to do then. Right? I finally had a singer like I wanted, and a great drummer. Joe Rizzo is a great drummer. He played with a lot of people. He ended up playing with D-Generation and Walter Lure for years. Yeah, it was a really good band. So I was really, really happy. I mean, I never, as much as we wanted to get signed or anything, I mean, we tried, but it was never really the point. I was just really happy to have a good band, to make this music.
Great video for Holly, by the way, which is really striking, featuring a setup of yourself and Chris. Mr. Ratboy, let's take a quick break and cut to a song, as again, more people need to be aware of some of this material if they haven't heard it. This is great rock and roll tunage from your past, from 1993, and lifted from the Jimbo's Clown Room album, which should have been massive. This is Pillbox with Sinister Urge. Pillbox there with the wonderful track Sinister Urge. There was a Joan Jett, Kenny Laguna connection for Pillbox, was there not? You just mentioned Kenny.
Yeah, the Steven Shipp, the manager, Chris's manager, was part of Jetlag, which was Kenny Laguna and Joan Jett. So we hung out with them a bit. Yeah, I used to go to Jetlag and stuff, see Joan, and it was interesting time.
Okay, and you did mention, before we move on, Joe Rizzo has also drummed with Waterloo. The Botswanas as well, who we were big fans of, and I think he cut a great album as part of Bellevue with Jesse Malin, which is well worth chasing down.
Yeah, I never heard it, but yeah, I heard that he was in that, but I never heard this album. But I'm sure if Joe's on it, it's good.
I did just mention Walter Lure, who I know you shared a great friendship with. Walter sadly passed away 2 years ago. He was hugely influential to you in so many ways, wasn't he?
Yeah, in musical ways, of course, he was always in the shadow of Johnny Thunders, but I always thought that he was nearly as important as Johnny as a guitar player. I mean, especially on the Heartbreaker stuff. I mean, he was a supporting act for Johnny very, very often. Also later in the solo stuff, I saw him many times play with Johnny, but he was a great guitar player. But also his lifestyle. I really appreciate the fact that he was a regular guy in a way. He had a day job. He could play music just for the hell of it. He was not. He didn't have to do anything. He could wait 20 years between albums if he wanted to. He was an interesting character this way. I really like that. I like people like that. I mean, that's the way I am now. I have a day job too, so I can relate to people like that.
Yeah. And of course, the Waldo's Rent Party album from 1994, produced by Andy Chernoff. I think that's in my top 10 of all time. It's an absolute monster of a record, that one.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's as good as any Heartbreaker stuff.
Yeah. Folks, not enough time to crank everything on this episode. So much of this material we're talking about can be found online, and I do encourage you all to jump on places like Spotify, search out Pillbox NYC and immerse yourself in some of this great rock and roll. Now, sometime during this time period with Pillbox, you also hook up with Jeff Dahl. You play on Jeff's Wasted Remains of a Disturbing Childhood album, and you also tour as part of the Jeff Dahl Band, including some dates in Japan, which is where you met Hiroshi, as you mentioned before. That's a big record, that one. If I think off the top of my head, Mercy Me is on there. Hey Cinderella come to mind. Fun times playing out with Jeff, Mr. Ratboy?
Yes, it was interesting. Jeff, I didn't know that Jeff was a Motorcycle Boy fan, but after I moved to New York, we were both on Triple X Records. So I heard through Triple X that he was a big fan and he wanted me to play on the next record. So I went back to LA just to record with him. It was really quick. That album was recorded in a couple of days or something, but it was really, really interesting. Really came out really good. And then we ended up doing this tour, European tour, very long European tour, followed by a few dates in Japan where I met Hiroshi. Yeah. So it was a really great experience.
Now, perhaps, and I know that Japan seems to be a great example of this, but many fans there connect your name as a member of Marky Ramone and the Intruders. How did that gig with Marky Ramone come up? And this is around, I guess, 1996, just after the Ramones had folded, correct? Is that? And you were pretty much a hired gun, right?
Yes. It was actually, this thing started before the Ramones folded. It was a Pillbox had toured with the Ramones. 95, I guess, or a year or 2 years before. So I stayed friendly with them. And when they were about to break up, Marky had already started recording this Marky Ramone and the Intruders album with Skinny Bones. His real name is Garrett Unbrock, who's really a good singer also and a good writer. And they had this record and they needed a live band. And so they started auditioning people, and tons of guys in New York wanted to audition for something like that. But they were just basically clowns. I mean, I went to the audition. I saw some guys audition. They would come with metal guitars, and it was just wrong. I showed up with my Les Paul Jr. and I forgot the guy says that's the guy. Everybody said, look at him, because I was playing low, and it's just I get the Ramones. I mean, I grew up on the. I was not acting or anything. It was natural to do that. For me. Yeah, so I totally understand that I got it, actually. I mean, there were other guys who could have gotten it, but maybe they did not audition. I don't know who auditioned, but the people I saw were just kind of obviously metalheads or people.
Yeah. And there is a story behind the 1996 album with Marky Ramone. You're on the back cover photograph, although you hardly played on that album, correct? So it kind of evened things out with the Pillbox, with the...
I thought it was Karma, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, with the Motorcycle Boy record.
Yeah, to have my picture on a bigger album, actually, than the Motorcycle Boy. And I didn't play a note. I played only one song. I wrote one song with Marky called Boomerang, which was my try at a Ramone song, and it came out only on the Japanese version of it. But I didn't play a note on the actual record.
The Marky Ramone and the Intruders release I like a lot, actually, has some fine moments. There's tracks like Can't Take It With You and Coward With a Gun. They're good examples. And, if fans want to check this out, there is some South American tour footage from that time period online. You did some dates with the Reformed Sex Pistols too. Those shows must have been an amazing experience.
Yeah, it was really amazing. We ended up playing some big festivals. It was Sex Pistols and us. Cypress Hill, which were really fun to hang out with, Silverchair, and Bad Religion. So it was an interesting bill. And we traveled, I remember, by airplane, so we were all in the same kind of smallish airplane. It was kind of cool to me, doing something like this for me.
I recall you once telling me that you have no idea how big the Ramones were in South America, and I agree. I mean, they really were godlike there, weren't they?
They were huge, but it's not only the Ramones. Like when we landed, I mean, it was like Beatlemania in Brazil. But then in the car, we were listening to the radio, and they were playing the Heartbreakers, and they playing like punk rock on the radio. I mean, at least 25 years ago. I don't know how it is now, but it's amazing. Like what they were playing on the radio was pretty, hardcore punk and stuff like that. And it was really popular. People like it. You could see the T-shirts and everything, what they wear. Quite interesting. Still kind of like that, huh?
Yeah, not just with punk. I mean, I can talk about, when Oasis played there, and you'll get the crowd singing in unison. Iron Maiden have the same thing. The crowd will just overtake the band pretty much. It's interesting.
I mean, everybody goes there. Like when we went there, Manowar was there, and it was the same for them. They were huge.
Before we move on, and I have got a nice segue lined up here, but as many students of rock and roll will know, the Ramones' End of the Century album was produced by Phil Spector, and you in fact played in front of Phil Spector one time, did you not? What's the story behind that one?
It was. We played a show with Bebe Buell. I was a guitar player, and Phil was there. It's the only time I met him. I played. It was fun. Bebe attracted really weird people. I also played in front of Gigi Allen, who was a huge fan of Bebe. And he was a really nice guy too, believe it or not. Yeah, with Bebe, I met quite a lot of interesting people, like Rico Kasek, and she was friends with a lot of people.
Now, you cut a wonderful solo album titled A Gift for Mr. Ratboy on Roulette Records. Was the connection there as Pillbox had released a 10-inch on Roulette, and how did that project come to fruition?
Yeah, the whole thing came. It came from Price Harrison from the Botswana. Roulette was his label. Is his label? He's still doing it. And he was a big fan of Pillbox, and he did the 10-inch, and then we broke up. And I had all these songs that Price knew because we were playing them live. And I had just done this Johnny Thunders track, and he liked it very much. And he said, "Do you want to do a solo album with these songs?" I was like, okay. I mean, I never thought about it. And again, I gathered my trusted Joe Rizzo on drums, and I played pretty much everything else. And we did these songs that were basically Pillbox songs. I wrote a few new ones, the slower stuff like Immaculate, and that were not songs that we had done. They were like studio stuff. And most of them were from the second singer in Pillbox, Mark Phelan, but there was also Down in Style was, for instance, Chris Berry lyric, and we wrote that one together, the first one. And I got some interesting people on it, like Fast Freddie Patterson playing saxophone on Down in Style. And I had Steve Wynn, who was a big Lou Reed fan, to play on The Gift. He sang on The Gift with me. So, yeah, it was good.
A great song. I love A Gift. But Rocket to Reno is a great track. And I've always liked the song Kiss and Kill a lot. But there's a soft and somewhat haunting tune on there called Invisible, which could in fact be my choice cut. Some piano accompaniment too on a song which evokes images of being very alone. Lyrics such as "The air I breathe is suffocating, all my garbage dreams are fading, seems like years since I heard the phone, tunnel vision is terrifying, I can hear my neighbours dying, all the lonely people crying and I'm slipping away." You know, I'm a music fan who always takes notes of lyrics. Those are evocative. Makes me want to ask, you know, about that song, and also if the process of writing lyrics comes easy for you or not.
I didn't write these lyrics. This was Mark Phelan.
Okay.
Now I do much better than before. These were really songs that I had written with the two singers of Pillbox. Mostly Mark Phelan. This is Mark Phelan, the second guitar player, the second singer, of Pillbox, who sang on the 10-inch, and who did really great stuff. Also, he was an acquired taste as a singer, but a great writer. I like his singing, but some people, of course, he had a tough act to follow after Chris Berry. People said maybe the Golden Rat can do Invisible. We could. It's similar kind of what the Golden.
Trouser Press, I think, nailed it with their review at the time, and I quote, "The debut solo effort from Mr. Ratboy is about as perfect a rock and roll record as you are likely to find in such a mess of a decade. As Pillbox's sonic architect, Mr. Ratboy reveals himself capable of writing and playing more complicated and subtle music, delicate piano, feedback and acres of space to strange melodic choruses."
Yeah, that's nice. What I like about this is that without saying it kind of shows that I managed to do what I wanted. Like, I always liked these mid-70s album, like Street Asshole, Lou Reed, albums like this that are really wide-ranging. In you know, you have like a really long song, instrumental, nearly like experimental, long 12-minute song, and you have these short rock and roll stupid songs, like I Want to Be Black or something like this. And I kind of wanted to do something like that, something very wide-ranging, and go left and right. There's some electronic songs. I play synthesizer. I collect synthesizer. I love to play synthesizer. Yeah. I put some on the CD as well. It's funny that you didn't mention, but I did a version of What She Wants was a song that I wrote, which was, well, one time it was called What She Says, and then it was called What She Wants. And on my solo album, it's called She Wants EML, which is the electronic version of it. So this is on every one of these albums. I played it just like only with one synthesizer. So it was kind of like something that follows my career. That's something.
Okay, I do wish to shine the light on Sour Jazz, the New York City outfit who you've been a member of for over 2 decades, criminally ignored by the hip media but loved and appreciated by real fans of rock and roll. No values, Lost for Life, Rock and Roll Liga, American Seizure, those 4 albums are as solid a body of work as some of the rock and roll greats, I think, from the 70s and beyond. And in some ways, if one looks over your journey in music, you know, with their ability to write catchy songs with clever lyrics, doing it their way with a rock and roll attitude, irrespective of fashion and current trends, one could say that you were always meant to be in an outfit such as Sour Jazz with other like-minded musicians. And if I may, I would like to read a part of your bio from this time period, which states, "After doing my solo album, I met Lou Paris. We started hanging out in clubs, and one night I told him, 'You don't want to be in a band. I don't want to be in a band. Why don't we put one together?' And that's what we did. It was hard to find people on the same wavelength. We didn't want to make it. Been there, done that. We just wanted to make good music and have fun while doing it." So I guess, you've made 4 excellent albums. I'm trying to say that they're as solid as body of work as any other band from different eras, just those 4 albums.
Yeah, I think so too, actually, yeah. This is my favorite stuff, I have to admit. It all leads up to these Sour Jazz albums.
That's a good way to put it.
It leads up to the second Sour Jazz album. To me, that's the best. The ones produced by Danny Ray are great, but they're more like, they really like big rock albums, right? But the first 2 ones are more like DIY, kind of really weird sounding and really fun albums, I think. Rest to the Left is good. The compilation of the first 2 albums that came out on CD. That's a good. Yeah, it's a good. It shows really what Sour Jazz is about.
Yeah. Well, there just seems to be so much. I think if there was a word to describe you, Mr. Popular, Cowboy Mark, and Splat Action, and Sour Jazz in general, it would just be fun. You always look like you enjoy what you do so much, and I think it comes across in the songs, and in the live shows. You're right at home in Sour Jazz. Yeah,
it is. We're still best friends. I mean, we just talk quite all the time. Cowboy Mark did the cover for the Golden Rat, and he's a very good graphic designer, and he did a good job on this cover. The whole band started, but just having fun. It was just like just hanging out. We used to just go practice, but we talk half the time and just joke and stuff. And all the stupid ideas we had, like we would do it. Like we have this song called Fortune Cookies, where I just collect. I ate at Chinese place for a month. I collected all the fortune cookies, and then I told Lou, I said, "Here, let's do a song with this," and we put them together. And it's
great.
It's a very positive song, because they never tell you you're going to die tomorrow. They always tell you like really positive stuff. So it was fun. Or when I challenged him to write a song called "I Live on a Street Called Rock and Roll," and Lou came up with a song called "I Live on a Street Called Rock and Roll," which was just, everything was like this. It was just really fun. On stage, in the studio, we had an idea, like a stupid idea. Nobody would stop us. We would just do it.
You did say that you've been blessed playing in 3 bands with 3 great singers. Motorcycle Boy with Francois, Pillbox with Chris Barry, and Sour Jazz with Lou. And you said, "I'm lucky. Good singers are a rare breed."
Yeah, I mean, for the type of music that I want to do, I really need a good singer. I don't consider myself a good singer. I can somewhat sing, but I'm not a good singer. These guys are like great lyricists, great singers. It's just, they are like, yeah, a modern version of what I listened to when I was a kid.
Great stage presence.
Yeah. It makes for a good band. The first thing you see in a band is a singer.
Yeah.
The guitar players, but most people don't look at the guitar players.
Sour Jazz did a tour of Japan in 2006, from memory, and a Spanish tour in 2010. Fond memories of those jaunts, Mr. Ratboy?
Yeah, it was totally fun, yeah. The 2006 was really fun because it was already home for me, playing in Japan. Really weird. For them, it was great to just come to Japan. The Spanish one was fun, but it was kind of like a little bit depressing in a way that the rock and roll scene was already kind of declining, I would say. We noticed that the audience was older. I had played in Spain with Jeff Dahl like 10 years or 15 years before. It was really different. It was just a bunch of old dudes and not so dynamic.
Okay.
Before. So they still have fans. I mean, rock and roll is still big in Spain, but not. It was just, I understood where it was going. Now we are there.
I guess, distance is an issue with the members of Sour Jazz, but do you think there's a possibility of another studio album?
I hope so. Yes, there's a strong possibility. We have one album that is unfinished that we recorded after that tour, 2011 or 12, something I forgot. And for some reason, Lou Paris kind of could not commit to finish this album at the time, and we didn't talk to him for a long time. But I met him again a couple of years ago, and we have reconnected now. And actually, I would love for him to finish this album. It was really good. We had 10 or 12 songs. And that could bring us, if we do it, it could maybe make us play out again. And maybe I would not be against trying to write new songs with them.
Great.
Actually.
Great. You recently stated, I believe, that if Motorcycle Boy, Pillbox or Sour Jazz would have had the opportunity to play big festivals in Brazil instead of Marky's Intruders, they would have made a lasting impression on the audience, but the business doesn't work like that. It's pretty interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, Marky has a built-in audience, right? He can go, but he also has to do certain things. And we went and we did a Ramones thing. This Marky Ramone and the Intruders was a really good band. The people are very talented. Marky is an amazing drummer. Every day I was playing with him, I just looked back and I couldn't believe that was the guy drumming for me, right? Like I'm playing with Marky. He's just an amazing drummer.
Mm.
But he's stuck in this Ramone thing. He has to do the Ramone thing. And I think people would have been open to, you say Pillbox was a great record that people didn't hear, but actually if people heard it, if we have had this kind of exposure, I think that, yeah, I agree that they would have probably liked it. Same with Motorcycle Boy and Sour Jazz as well. I always said I played the biggest shows with Marky, and it was maybe, I was not going to say the worst music because it was good, but the least inventive music, I would say. We were limited to what we could do. I mean, Garrett, Skinny Bones, is a great writer and everything. He could do much more. I mean, you could look him up. He's still doing stuff. He's on YouTube. He's a great writer, great singer. He had much more in him than doing just over and over Ramone type stuff.
Mate, let's take a break very quickly and we'll crank some Sour Jazz. Why the hell not? And this was tough because there are so many wonderful tracks to choose from, but I have gone with Fun Dumb Days taken from the American Seizure record. Let's take another quick break and air that, and then we'll start to finish up. Mate, let me hit you with a few random ones before we move on. Now, I have known you for a number of years. You've got some great rock and roll stories. And if I may, I do wish to highlight a couple of them. Here's one. Bo Diddley calling you on the phone one time. Can you tell us about that one?
Yeah, that was during the Motorcycle Boy recording. So it was a really amazing time. We were in the studio close to LAX. And we were in there for 2 weeks, I think, recording. And at that time, Bo Diddley was also signed to XXX, and the guys knew that I was a huge fan. But I think they tried to get him to come to the studio, but he couldn't come because it's really far. So instead, they had him call me, and so it was really funny. I was in the studio, phone rings, and they say, "Oh, it's for you." And so I go, and he goes, "Who's this?" I say, "Ratboy." I go, "Who's this?" He goes, "Bo." And I say, "What? Bo Diddley?" And it was Bo Diddley. We talked for a little bit, and it was just really nice. It was fun.
Love it.
And in the studio also, there was somebody else showed up. It was funny because Sylvain knew a lot of people, right? And one day, Frank Infante showed up with Frank DiMino, the guy from Angel. And I loved Angel. Sure. I always loved Angel. So I was just like, wow, this is cool. They lived in a neighborhood or something at the time. And there was no Angel at that time. I guess they reformed sometime afterwards.
Yeah.
But it was, it was 10 years after the fact. I met weird people like during this recording. That was really fun.
What about talking to Little Richard at the post office?
That was in LA also. Like I was just at the post office. I was kind of zoning out, and I'm looking at this guy who was really kind of glammy, but I didn't think anything. And he goes, "Yeah, baby, it's me, Little Richard." It was Little. I didn't notice. I was just looking at him blankly. Then we talked a little bit. He was really fun too.
I know we mentioned before you tried to give an audition tape to Iggy, but it's also true you auditioned for Michael Monroe, Demolition 23, did you not?
Yes, that was true. Sammy was a friend of mine, and he played with Walter. He played in an early version of sour jazz, but he was maybe a little bit too serious for us. But I have demos actually. I just listened to it the other day, and at one point, if I remember properly, the guitar player got hit by a bus or something, and they were trying to get a new guitar player, but it didn't work out at all. It was just Michael Monroe is also close to my age and listened to the same kind of stuff, but he was very professional and we were at a different place in our lives, I guess. I was not ready to do that. I don't like my stuff. He was telling me how to play guitar and stuff, and I don't like that either. He wanted me to play like the other guy had played and everything. It was more like a standard guitar player who played on that record. He plays very well. I forgot who it was. In the end, I think they got Nasty Suicide to finish his tour.
Love it. Great stories. You know, one thing I've always loved about you is that besides being a musician, you're also a huge music fan with a variety of tastes. And I can recall having conversations with you over the years about everyone from Oasis to L7 to Accept to the fairly obscure Sirith Ungol, to name a few off the top of my head. You are a lifer, and I am going to quote from your bio again, which states, I feel close to real lovers of rock and roll like Walter Lua and Dennis Tech, because being financially independent, they can afford to do exactly what they want. That is the way I've been playing music for over 2 decades, and the way I'm planning to continue doing it. I see myself as a lifer for the music, not the lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, it's just if you try to get signed and have like a manager and everything, people are going to tell you what to do. They're going to tell you what they want, and it changes all the time. And at my age anyway, I'm not competitive anymore. So it's like, this, what do I get out of this? Nothing. The only thing I want to do is play music that I'm proud of.
Yeah.
That's all it is to me. And nowadays, I mean, even the sour jazz records, the 4 sour jazz records, we paid ourselves. We didn't want to have a record deal. We did not want to have anybody tell us what to do or tell us, you cannot do that. This is what I hate the most. I go in the studio, I have this idea, well, let's do this. Oh, you can't do that. You can't record like this. There's always these people. Like Motorcycle Boy, at one point, we did a demo deal with Virgin or something. Somebody came and said, I see you guys like a mix between the Cult and Scorpions. And I was just like, I can't fucking work with people like this. You know, we're just like, we're out of here. That's why we ended up with a small label.
Yeah.
The big labels, they had this idea what we should be doing or what we should look like. It was not at all this type of band. It was the same mentality that I have now, but we were still trying to get signed. It was kind of like we wanted to have it all, like do whatever we wanted and still make the big money, but it just doesn't work like that.
If I could put you on the spot then, can you name a few songs which you've recorded over your career which you are most proud of, and why?
I would have to look at the covers, but yeah, I mean, Feel It, One Punch, because that was the beginning of it. And maybe you like stories. One story you don't know is that this was recorded on Tom Petty's guitar amp. Actually, we recorded this in a studio, and Petty had all his equipment stored in that studio, and I didn't have an amp. And
this is Feel It, One Punch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the studio said, well, you could take anything you want, just put it back where it was. So I took a box AC30, and it said Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and it was that's what I recorded on. So that was also, for me, it was kind of, wow, it was fun, right? But these 2 songs for me are kind of special. Sour jazz, a lot of the songs, I mean, really, I Live on the Street called Rock and Roll, I think is pure genius. I would buy something like this instantly.
Yeah, I Got to Change, I love.
Yeah, I Got to Change too. Sinister Urge, it's funny that you picked that one, because to me, that's also, the riff is really good. Basically, my guitar style has been, I was floored when I heard New Values by Iggy Pop. And I always thought nobody took that further than these few songs like 5'1" or New Values and this was actually, again, we come back to Tom Petty. The guy playing guitar on this album is Scott Thurston, who was in the Stooges playing keyboards.
Sure.
and we ended up playing also keyboard in Tom Petty and guitar and playing harmonica and stuff. This guy is a genius, and he created this guitar style that I never really heard anywhere else before. And for me, it was just like I grabbed onto that much more than Williamson, which I'm not such a fan. I'm a huge Ron Ashton fan, but Williamson not so much. But Scott Thurston is God for me for like this type of little riffs, like so slinky. It just moves constantly. It's like, yeah, you don't even need a drummer or anything. If you play these riffs, it's just you move your ass already. I always tried. The first one I did like that was maybe I Get Around from Motorcycle Boy. That's the beginning of that kind of thing. I'm really proud of that one. But there's so many, man.
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the show, that you do have your own distinct sound, and many fans who've bought your material over the years, they can pick it when they hear it, and it's been wonderful to look over some of your journey. Let's start to wind this show up and get out of here. So much of your story we didn't get to. Ace Killers Union, the Has-Beens, to name a couple off the top of my head. So I do encourage folks to search out some of the bands and recordings which Mr. Ratboy's been involved with, as they are all highly, highly recommended. Your rock and roll journey has been a fascinating one. The music which you've released throughout your life has resonated with so many of us, and it's been really rewarding to highlight some of it. So thank you, brother.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope people dig the new one too, which doesn't have any of my guitar trademark sound because I don't play any electric guitar on it, but hopefully anyway.
The release date for the new album from the Golden Rat is the 29th of October. And I believe there is a live show at the Stato Live House in Tokyo to launch the album. So if you're listening in from Japan, jump on a train and head to Musashi Sakai Station. The album is called We Got It Right, and it's available soon on Vicious Kitten Records. To get a hold of the new album by the Golden Rat, head to viciousKitten.bandcamp.com. If you're listening in from outside Australia, the good folks at MVD Entertainment Group are handling distro. You can head to mvdshop.com to purchase your copy. And if Instagram be your thing, you can touch base with Hiroshi at the Golden Arms JP. I will give these links to all these places in the show notes. Mr. Ratboy, before you go, every guest on our show gets to choose a song by an Australian band, something which is significant to you. I know you've got a great love of many Australian bands, so this may be tough. What would you like to choose and why?
It would change all the time, but today maybe I'll take the Saints, Swing for the Crime.
Interesting. Why have you chosen that one?
Because it's like where the Saints were going when they stopped with Ed Cooper and Chris Bailey. I would have loved to hear more of that. It's as far as they went with the horns, with the big production and everything, which I really, really love that album. And it's something that led me wanting more.
Wonderful, wonderful choice. Thank you again for your time this evening. The Golden Rat, We Got It Right. Good luck with the album and for the remainder of the year.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.